Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation. And look who's back. It's John the Music Nut from the USA. How are you, mate?
I'm doing great, Peter. How about you?
I'm doing well. Good to have you back on the channel.
Thank you.
Today, we're going to do something completely different, a band that we don't normally cover on this station or on this channel, and the band is R.E.M. We are going to talk about an album which was very much maligned in the day, and we're calling it R.E.M Up. And we are going to spotlight maybe 5 or 6 songs, what we like, what we don't like, and a bit of a summary of what we think the album is like. Do we like it or we don't? So I'll throw over to you, John. What was your first impressions of this album when you first heard it in 1998?
Thank you, Peter. In 1998, when I first heard this, when I had a friend who was a longtime R.E.M fan introduced me to it, I did not like the album at all. I thought that it was a tremendous step down from the previous albums they did before. Over time, I appreciate this more, but I still like everything they did before that, and a couple of the albums they did after this more. I did appreciate the experimentation on here. They did try something different, like U2 had done with Zooropa and would do with Pop. But like those albums, I think there are some things that work and a lot of things that don't. And it's an album that, I mean, there are some songs I really like, but then there's a lot that don't really resonate with me even 25 years later.
Yeah. Well, I have to say my experience with this album was absolutely zero in the day, because R.E.M is not in my wheelhouse, or was not in my wheelhouse. And my wife actually had this in her CD collection, and she picked this up in a $5 bargain bin. So about 2 years ago, whacked it in the car. I've still got a CD player in my car and played it. And I have to say, it was so dull and so boring, I almost had to go to the side of the road and have a bit of a snooze. I don't like it at all. But I thought, just for this, the purposes of this show, let's revisit it and see if my first impression is confirmed. Is it a dull album? You know, what we like, what we don't like, etc., etc. So I'll go over some stats in respect of this album. This is their 11th album. It came out in 1998, hit number 3 in the US charts, attained gold status, number 2 in UK, and number 5 in Australia. It was definitely a step down. And I can tell you, through trawling a lot of sort of CD bins, I have seen so many copies of this album returned, or so many copies of the album with the little cutout, which signifies that it's a bit of a stinker commercially. It did not sell. This was an album that signified the band as a 3-piece, because in 1995, Bill Berry had a brain aneurysm on stage. He did briefly return to the band, but he resigned and just really basically had enough of touring. So it was a band in flux. Peter Buck, Mike Mills, and Michael Stipe. They brought in a couple of drummers, session drummers, and also had some drum machines, etc., through the course of the album, which we will talk about. So that's the stats. Band in flux, different sort of landscape. So why don't we talk about the songs in general? So we'll spotlight one song each. What's your first song that you'd like to spotlight on this album?
Well, I'd like to talk about one that I like first. I thought Lotus was a good single. That's the second track on the album. That's the only song on here that I think has a decent hook. It is one of the few songs on this album called Up that's actually an up song. It is a good song. I don't think it's a great song. I don't think it's one of their best in their canon or anything. And I do like some of Peter Buck's guitar work on here. And on this album, I think most of the songs that really work have Peter Buck guitar playing a strong role on it. On this album, I think Peter Buck became more of an Andy Summers from The Police. And the fact that he was bringing in more color on the songs than he was the jangly pop riffs. So I thought his guitar work on here was very strong. And I think it's a good song. So Lotus is one that I will give a spotlight to.
Well, I might do a response because I selected this as one of the songs that I wanted to spotlight.
Okay.
It's a psychedelic song. Starts off with a really good groove. Mm-hmm. There is a great guitar line, and it builds. Basically, the whole premise on the song is a keyboard line counterpoint with a distorted guitar riff. And folks, all the way through this album, it's this keyboard line and distorted guitar. To me, it's very light on drums. Even when they got the session drummers, it's so way back. To me, it feels very demo-like and unfinished, but we'll talk about that more later. The melody doesn't go anywhere. So it starts off well and you go, okay, there's a bit of a hook here, and it repeats and repeats and repeats. And then you get a little bit sort of fatigued and it seems to go nowhere. So, there's that initial rush that you go, okay, this is one of the few decent songs on the album, but it does dissipate. Lyrically, it's interesting. The main line on this is, I ate the lotus. And I did a little bit of research it's a plant in Greek mythology that has intoxicating effects, and you eat it and you never want to go anywhere. You never want to leave. So the lyrics throughout this album are very surreal, but you alluded to something. The album is called Up, but it makes you feel very down. It's the most, awkward name for an album. When you listen to it, there's not much up to it. It's quite depressing. It's quite intense. And you can see that the band was really feeling the loss of Bill Berry. It was maybe like a separation, a divorce, not that it was, but having one of your foundation members no longer in the band and you're now a three-piece, you're finding your way. So anyway, that's my response to Lotus. Starts off well, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere. And it was a single off the album.
Yes. So what would your next song be? What one would you like to talk about?
I'll start off with the first song, which is Airport Man. Okay. So it's really important in an album with track sequencing. You've got to start off with a bang. And this just meanders. Yes. So it's an electronic sounding song. The thing that I listened to this was Kid A. I could really see where Radiohead got their sound. But the difference between Kid A and this album in the electronic sense is Kid A feels finished. It feels much more thought through. The production's better. And, there is some melody uplift and there's a little bit more structure. This one just goes nowhere. So lyrically, it's about a man who sits in an airport and he watches people go by. He works at the airport and he lives his life vicariously through these other people. Interesting idea. But you've got this cheesy drum machine sound with Peter Buck's guitar feedback, squalling all the way through it, and this meandering piano line. It's kind of boring and it's kind of tuneless and it's not memorable. And this is album track number 1. So I'm sorry, it's a cliche, but you put it in the outer CD and you go, Houston, we've got a bit of a problem here.
Yeah. It would work as a 1-minute intro instead of a 4-minute song, because when it plays out over that time, and it never changes.
It's a drone.
It's just thank you. It's just a drone. And it goes on for 4 minutes and it feels a lot longer because it's just so dull.
It is.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So could you imagine this being played live? And they did tour this album.
Yes.
And when I was listening to this album, I'm going, gee whiz, these songs, if you had to inject these songs into their song list with all the hits, and I'm talking about the Uber hits from Automatic for the People, et cetera, I mean, the crowd would stand up and then they'd sit down in their seats and maybe go to the bar and get a bourbon. I don't know.
Right. I can't argue that at all. I'm with you. That's down song to start an album called Up.
It is. And there's a little bit of self-indulgence in this.
Yes.
Michael Stipe, fantastic songwriter, but there is an element of self-indulgence, and this album is slightly self-indulgent.
I agree completely.
What's your next pick, mate?
Okay, thank you. The Apologist. This may be one of my 2 or 3 least favorite songs on the album. This is boring. I'm sorry. So sorry. So sorry. So sorry. That's the chorus. Boring. It does not work.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I was listening to that. I was when I was listening to this song, I was thinking, gee, yeah, I was almost talking back at the speaker saying, "You're sorry."
You're sorry. I'm sorry you recorded this. This is for a band that had so many great songs. This is one of their worst. Hate to say it. It just doesn't go anywhere. It's down. It's dull. I don't care for this in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. No, that's a good pick to illustrate the downside of this album.
Mm-hmm.
My next one is a little bit of Baroque pop, and it's At My Most Beautiful. So this really picks up on the Beach Boys. And well, for starters, I'm not a Beach Boys fan, so that really sort of that's poking the bear there. Sorry, viewers. I'm trying my best. It is a bit of a Beach Boys tribute. It's a piano ballad, and it picks up off Smile, because Michael Stipe was, he was listening to Smile and he wanted to do a little bit of a gift to the band, some gift. The vocals are underdone. So for a Brian Wilson Beach Boys type of song, you really want to not put yourself restrained. You really want to put yourself right up in the mix, front and center. It doesn't connect emotionally. It's got all the bells and whistles. It's got all the window dressing, so it's melodically very pretty. It's got a simple, repetitive type of melody, but it just goes nowhere. So you've got all the beautiful arrangements, but it just doesn't connect. And I think the reason why it doesn't connect is because vocally it's just so restrained. And,
Yes. I like this song. It's one of the better songs on the album. I do like that Michael Stipe did I think this is his first love song with R.E.M. And but if you compare this to A Night Swimming, for instance, from Automatic for the People, it doesn't have that. It doesn't really grab you like that song. It's good, but they've done better. I do like the fact that they're echoing the Beach Boys here. So yes, I do like the song, but I've heard them do better on songs with piano in them in the past. Like this is no Anybody Hurt. Oh, Everybody Hurts. I'm sorry. Or Night Swimming, as I mentioned. It's good. It's one of the better songs on the album, but that's saying a lot about the album too. That it's not so good.
Yeah,
and
because
it's mostly a down affair.
Absolutely, because the album is really downbeat, and I guess you have these little glimmers of optimism or something that perks up.
Yes,
but when you reflect and, sort of on these particular songs, you go, I don't know, is that all it is? It just, to me, it seemed like it needed more. And I think it's to do with the vocals. And I know the producer of this album is Pat McCarthy. So their long standing producer, Scott Lett, was out, and they brought in Pat McCarthy. And he did a lot of work with Counting Crows, U2 and R.E.M. And to me, I think there's got to be a certain amount of responsibility for the production choices here, because it's still very demo sounding. It doesn't sound like a band. And sonically, as I said, I think to do with the bottom end. It's the drumming. They've got two drummers in. So they've got Barrett Martin, who did drumming for the Screaming Trees, and you've also got Joey Waronker, who did drumming for Beck and Atoms for Peace. And it doesn't have the groove or in the pocket that Bill Berry had. And it's sad to say, when you lose an integral member of your band, and the drummer's extremely important.
Yes.
What can you say?
Exactly. They lost their foundation, is what they did. That's what you'd have to say.
Yeah. All right, mate. What's your next pick?
Thank you. Hope. Loud, annoying synthesizers, a rhythm that changes very little throughout the song. I don't think this should have been recorded. There's not much here. Leonard Cohen has a co-write on this, but he didn't actually co-write the song. What happened was they gave him a co-write because the melody and the lyric, it's in the same vein as his song Suzanne from Songs of Leonard Cohen, his debut. That's why you see him listed in the credits. However, don't compare these two songs at all. Suzanne is a classic. This would have been left best on the cutting room floor. There's nothing to it. It's just 4 minutes of loud keyboards and drum machine and Michael Stipe singing the lyric. He doesn't really, and his vocal, he doesn't really. He just stays in that same range. It just like here and there. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, I think this did wound the band, didn't it? I don't think they ever quite recovered after this album. If you look at their commercial fortunes, they never hit the heights of Automatic for the People and all that. You'd have to say they were at their peak worldwide, late 80s, early 90s. Very early 90s, but after this album, I don't think they were quite the same.
I would disagree. I thought they got their groove back on Accelerate. Like the fans didn't all come back, but those last two albums, Accelerate and Collapse Into Now, they were very strong comeback albums for R.E.M.
Yeah, I guess I'm talking about commercial.
Commercially? You're absolutely correct.
Sales.
Oh, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, I think it because for a band to sell so many albums, you have to draw in the casual listener, the person that listens to classic rock radio. They lost all of those listeners through this album.
They did.
And that's why it's so evident that there's so many return CDs. I don't think I have seen so many of one band. I'm going to do a show potentially in the future about, there are certain acts that you see or certain records where you go bargain bins and you see so many copies. And it's usually a rejection by the public of, we don't like it. And they definitely those sort of casual listers did reject this album.
It went from 2 million for New Adventures in Hi-Fi to gold for Up. So it's it sold a quarter of what their previous album had done. And that didn't sell as well as Monster might be 2 million, but Automatic for the People was 4. So there was already a drop off, and then it's dropped heavily and never recovered.
Yeah.
And think about this, Peter. This is when people were still buying a ton of CDs.
It's true. Monster's interesting because that's an album that cops a little bit of flack, but I find that a bit interesting because at least they're experimenting, but the songs sound a little bit more structured. They're experimenting here, but it's unfinished.
Correct.
And look, if you were somebody who wanted to explore the R.E.M catalog and you stumbled upon this, you'd go, "Oh, I'm not sure." It's not a good reflection of their musical wheelhouse. But,
yeah, I agree. And my sentiments on Monster are the same. I really enjoy that album. It's probably in the middle of my pack, but I'd still give it like a 9 out of 10.
I mean, it was a reaction to grunge. It was, they had their ears to what was happening all around. What's the frequency, Kenneth? That got airplay, but I don't recall this album getting airplay, even on the alternative stations, that much.
No, not much at all. Just here, you heard Lotus a little, and that was it. That's it.
Interesting. All right. My choice now, I'm going to pick Youre In The Air. I think it's a great vocal performance from Michael Stipe, but the song doesn't deserve the vocal performance. It meanders. It has a jangly guitar, soaring strings, the little trademark mandolin sound comes in, but at the end of it, it's forgettable. There's no hooks. You don't remember it. When the song is over, what happened? So it's a case where, this is the opposite to the other one, where At Most Beautiful had nice arrangements and Michael Stipe's vocals were pushed back. It's like it's flipped over. It's one of his best vocal performances. Vocally, the tonality, he's soaring. He's giving it his all. But the arrangement is just, it's kind of average. And it just doesn't deserve his vocals.
My notes match what you said.
Yeah.
Great vocal. That little mandolin line.
Do we have to hear that? Do we have to hear that again?
Yeah.
Seriously, you've done that a few times now, Lance.
That's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah. All right.
Was that your next song?
I have as one that I would say is down. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a bunch here in case we repeat it.
Yeah. What's your next one?
Let's go with. I don't think Diminished is very good. I mean, Diminished just stays down the whole time. It's no melody here. It's just the same thing. And the only time it gets a little interesting is in the last minute, and it's a 6-minute song, when the song stops and it goes into an acoustic song by Michael Stipe called I'm Not Over You. And that's the only interesting part of the song. The rest of the song is just a downer. It just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, look, folks, I get why. I get there's irony in this. They call the album up,
right,
but it makes you feel down. But seriously, it's a little bit obvious. Interesting when you look through the booklet, my friend. There's no photos of the band. The artwork was very much. You could sort of see where Kid A. It's kind of nice. Some interesting artwork. It's nicely presented, but very no band photos. I don't know. I just get the feeling that it's not a happy project.
Yeah,
and it comes out and it's rushed. Doesn't feel like it's thought through.
Yeah, the song's called Diminish, but it'll diminish your mood. I mean, it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
All
What do
right.
you have?
Yeah.
That's all I can give it.
Yep. Another song called Why Not Smile, which is, when you read the lyrics, the concrete broke your fall. To hear you speak of it, I'd have done anything. I feel like a cartoon break wall. Ooh. It's about depression.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a demo, and you've got that sonically keyboard versus fuzz guitar all the way through this album.
Mm-hmm.
It's the constant musical template where you've got the Peter Buck and his sonic fuzzy guitar and the one note keyboard lines. It's kind of dull.
I agree with that. A pretty melody, but and then it just stays in that same melody while Peter's guitar just gets louder.
Yeah.
This is a band who made some really creative music, and this just doesn't measure up to what they did before.
Yep.
Not memorable.
Yeah. However, there is one memorable song on the album, and I'm interested to hear if you chose this one. It was actually a single.
Okay.
Do you know which one I'm talking about, maybe?
I'm not sure, but it is a song that a lot of people I've seen in reading reviews on this album love. And I agree. I love Day Sleeper.
So do I. Sorry, I had to lead the witness a little bit here, folks.
He reeled me in.
Yeah.
Day Sleeper.
It's like classic R.E.M.
It is. It would have fit right in on Out of Time or Automatic for the People.
It's just like this track that's been floating around in the vaults. Let's bring it out and we'll whack it on. It sticks out. It
does stick out because it's good.
Yeah, it's whimsical. It's got the lyrical flourish. It's got it actually sounds better produced than the rest of the album. It's sparkly.
And Michael sounds up.
It's got that emotional connection.
Yeah, Michael sounds happy singing this. He sounds like he's up. Especially when he goes into that chorus. It's just Day Sleeper. I mean, the way he sings it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was another single. And I think it did sort of trouble the mid-range charts all around the world. But it sticks out.
It does. Absolutely.
Any other tracks that you want to spotlight, mate?
Yeah, I will talk about another one that I like. I don't know if you're going to like it, but I like Sad Professor.
All right.
That song I really like. I like the lyric here. It's about someone who influenced others, but to me, it seems that way. And then his demons kind of get the best of him. And I think when Peter comes in with the guitar lines, I think it adds a lot to it. I'm not saying it's a great song by R.E.M, but certainly one of the 3 best songs on the album. I really dig it. Sad Professor.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not a big fan of that song. Okay. And I'm certainly not a big fan of the closer song, Falls to Climb.
I'm not either.
That is a really dour way to finish the album. So it starts off with a dour song and it finishes with a very dour song. So even from a song listing perspective, it's quite a bit of a head scratch.
I think that one might have worked a little better if it was more organic. I think the keyboards ruin it. It just sounds like there's something there, but again, the keyboards just overtake it. And it's it brings the album down on a down level, as most of it is. But I mean that one, that I wrote. If it were organic, maybe it would work on Out of Time. Maybe. So, yeah.
Well, so I guess all in all, what's your opinion of this album?
It's, you got to be in a, if you're down, don't listen to Up, because you'll become more down. I mean, it's if a fan said, where should I start? I certainly wouldn't tell them to start here. I'd tell them to start with any of the albums they did before this, before I would talk about Up. I don't think it's a complete washout, but I do think it's one of their worst albums, and their catalog was pretty consistent up to this point. As a ranking, I think I'm going to go I might go a little higher than you. I'm thinking I'd probably give it like a 5.5. But I mean, there are a few good songs on here worth exploring, but you know, when you compare it to what came before and those last two that I mentioned earlier, it comes up short.
Yeah, I think it's one of their worst albums. I'd give it about maybe a 3 or a 4.
Okay.
Simply that there are two songs that sort of Day Sleeper is, gives it a bit of a lift, and there's some moments, there are glimpses of R.E.M, whether it's vocally or arrangements, but they never seem to mesh. So like Lotus starts off well, but then it sort of meanders, and then you've got Michael Stipe and that, You're in the Air, beautiful performance, but the song doesn't support it. So, I have to give it a 3 or a 4, but definitely not a strong album. Well, there you go. Well, thank you again. You deliver the goods. Hate to be negative on stuff, but I think this is all part of what we do. We sort of look at both sides of the coin in regards to that. And look, R.E.M have done some magnificent albums, but this is not one of them. And we just got to call it out for what it is. There's a lot of critics that have gone back and done a little bit of revisionism on the albums and sort of saying, yes, wasn't liked in the day, but we like it a lot more now. I don't get it. I still think it's got a lot of flaws, and just got to call it as I see it.
And
please
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry. The first time I heard this, I would have gave it a 2.
Oh,
so it has grown. So it has grown on me over the years.
It's gone. Still. Maybe in 10 years' time.
Maybe it'll go up to a 6.5 for me.
Yeah. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Please put your comments down. What you think of this album? What you think of R.E.M? What do you think their best album is? John and I really enjoy looking at your comments, and guarantee we'll be doing a show very soon. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
See ya.